So getting right into it on El Big League Show. Welcome back, Danny.
Glad to be back. Doing excellent, man. Doing excellent.
Good, man. You must be riding high with Hurricanes football doing as well as they are.
Yeah, Hurricane football rolling. I'm looking forward to fall ball for baseball, man. Just get the nice weather, kind of empty stands, just kind of watching, having fun. That's the next thing on my calendar. But yeah, football's rolling. Big game this weekend, and yeah, keep it going.
Well, I think we got a good guest that's on theme and on the theme overall of El Big League Show. I want El Big League Show to incorporate all sorts of different voices in the game, all sorts of different angles and perspectives of ways of looking at baseball. And more than anything, I selfishly want to have the baseball conversations that I used to have in my previous career. And we have Laz Gutierrez here with us today, who I really enjoy having baseball conversations with over the course of a long amount of time, which we could get into. But it's the reason I wanted you to come sit in that chair, because I wanted to replicate a version of the conversations that you and I have had over the years that I really take a lot of value from, and I really learned a lot from you. So, Laz Gutierrez, current role, and then we'll get into your upbringing here in Miami.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here with you and Danny, and because of our background and working, for the Red Sox at one point, just seeing your journey, man. It's been incredible, and so I'm just excited here to talk some chop.
Good. So current role is pitching coach at the University of Miami.
Yes.
Correct?
Correct.
Congratulations. I know that for you as a University of Miami alumni, that's a big deal, man. It must be a dream scenario, and it doesn't surprise me that you would arrive in a role like that and be as impactful as you've been. But let's kind of peeling it back to Miami overall. I'm seeing here that you and I are alumni of Brito Miami Private School.
Yeah.
I did
Panthers.
not, in that, it's funny, we've had so many conversations over the years, we never get to that point, but it's such a small, tiny school that to have gone there myself and yourself, I went there in elementary school, but is that where you played your high school ball?
High school ball, so 10th through 12th grade, class of 95. I was a public school kid, and then I decided to public school kid from Hialeah, and so decided to go to Brito, which was an amazing decision.
Was it a baseball decision then?
Baseball decision. Get to play with some of the kids I grew up in Hialeah Core League, and I played for an amazing coach that impacted my life, and Ralph Suarez, which continues to impact young lives in the area. He's the head baseball coach at Doral Academy and still does an amazing job. And so, I don't think I would have had the spotlight that I did if I didn't go to Brito Miami Private. And, that provided me a platform where I was able to showcase my talent, and, I was able to go to the University of Miami after that. But I don't know if that happens if I didn't go to Brito.
It's funny, what I remember it being like the marquee sport at the school. It was like, so the reason you end up there is because they develop a pretty good baseball program at that point, and through Ralph Suarez, and they become known as one of the local kind of prominent baseball programs during that time. Because I was young and didn't know much about what was going on, but it was clear that the baseball players were the people at the school. I'm wondering if I was, you said what, 95? Class
so
of 95?
I was there 93, 94, 95, and we were the first group.
Interesting.
That really got the baseball program going.
Okay.
We, like I said, it was like 10 of us from Hialeah, and we would ride in this minivan every morning from Hialeah down to the city of Miami. And I look back on that, and what an incredible journey, right? You got 11 kids on this tiny little van. We're stacked up, on top of each other, and we go play at this small little private school where we're wearing these yellow and green uniforms every day to class. So, and you're hanging around with kids probably that were your age, elementary school age, and so it was neat. It was neat, and it was different for me because I was in public school my entire life, but again, completely appreciative. And I don't think my journey ends where it is now if I didn't take that turn, and obviously my parents allowed me to go, right? I lived right next to Hialeah High, the easy thing would have been just to go to Hialeah High. And, I begged my parents to let me go play for Ralph Suarez. And they did. And it just ended up real well for me. Very fortunate.
High school Laz as a baseball player, left-handed pitcher.
Left-handed pitcher.
What was now that you've been a scout and a pitching coach, what was your profile? What was...
So I have to say this, Adrian. Every pitcher always says that they were a good hitter.
Yep.
I was also the starting center fielder, so okay. I got to throw that in there.
That tracks.
But no, pitching was my thing. I was a fastball, curveball, changeup guy. I was probably more advanced from a physical standpoint, right? So I matured a little earlier, and so that probably put me to the front of the line.
Sure.
So as I look back and I analyze it from a critical standpoint and put my coaching cap and my scouting cap on, I was physically gifted, but I was also physically ahead of some of these other kids, where some of those kids that maybe weren't physically mature like I was, but were talented, those kids ended up being, at the end of the day, better than I was, right, down the road. And so...
You got to your ceiling a little quicker?
I got to my ceiling a little earlier.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Coach, I'm going to ask you this selfishly and for the listeners. Selfishly, because my son is a lefty center fielder and pitcher, right? And I'm trying to develop him, but also I know a lot of youth baseball dads watch this show. Yeah. What was the most important thing to your development at that age? Now looking back with all that you've learned about baseball, saying, man, this was something that really helped me and I wish I did more of this, or I want to emphasize this aspect of my development.
Right. I think if there's something that I would emphasize, especially in today's day where we're specializing our kids at such a young age, I think being a two-way guy allowed me to be more athletic. It allowed me to not just focus on pitching and put this heavy volume of throws in, because I was playing another position, right? So it wasn't just pitching. I played a position where you had to integrate, skills that you normally wouldn't if you were just a pitcher, right? And so the one thing, if I were to emphasize something and really try to message to the parents of young kids that are playing the sport, allow them to play multiple positions. This will allow them to develop physically in different ways that they wouldn't if they were just one position. I would take it a step further. Allow them to play other positions. Or I'm sorry, not other positions. I just said that, but other sports. I think we've entered this age where we want to specialize at such a young age that if we look at the literature, the burnout rate in young athletes is through the roof like no other generation. And that's because we zero in on what we think our child should be when they enter high school, when they go to college. This is what's going to give them the best opportunity. And in reality, we don't know that. But what we do know is that if we allow our children to play multiple sports, play multiple positions, they tend to enjoy the sport more, right? So they become more resilient, and then in turn also they become more athletic because they're having to utilize and tap into different skills that they normally wouldn't if they played one sport. Or they play one position, I should say.
Ralph Suarez, like I said, that name comes up a lot. Why were you compelled to play for that program? Like, what was it about that person that made you have that strong of a feeling then, and then now, still talking about it this many years later?
Listen, as I think about this, and honestly, I'm getting goosebumps. And I know sometimes we say that a lot, but I never use that. But I honestly got goosebumps. He cares about the right things. He cares about his kids going to college. He does not fall short of trying to sell his kids to different colleges. And he always kept that in the forefront. Like any coach, like any competitor, he wanted to win. But he understood that at that level, the number one objective is to develop these young men to be productive members of society, but to give them an opportunity to play at the next level. And, I say this story all the time when I talk about Ralph. Back in the mid-'90s, you didn't have the showcases that you have now, right? I mean, there seems to be a showcase every weekend where, obviously it's a positive thing because it provides a platform for these kids to be seen by colleges and professional teams. But also you have so many that at times it gets watered down. So that's on one end of the spectrum. When we were growing up in the 90s, you had zero. But there was this one, it was called the Fall Classic up in Virginia. And it's 6 of us in my senior class. It's in the fall at some point, fall of 94. And he rents this van. He drives us up to this event. He sleeps on the floor so that we could sleep on the bed, so that we could be well rested. The games start and not that I saw this part, but I've had college coaches tell me this part of the story. He's running up and down the stands trying to talk to every college coach about, hey, this is so-and-so. This is so-and-so.
Wow.
It's just amazing. And he's been very successful, obviously, from a results standpoint, winning all these state titles at Doral and at Brito and at Miami Christian at one point. But I think people don't understand the impact that he's had with his kids going on to play at the next level, but not only play, but get their degrees, So he's special. He's special in our baseball community. And, I wouldn't be where I am now if it wasn't because of him.
Wow. That's such a powerful thing, like that role that you could play in a young man's life at that point, and it could steer it in so many different directions. But the proactivity to chase that down, right? Because not every kid is a clear fit for all programs.
Right.
So you have to really creatively position the argument for that individual player. I think that, it was had on my behalf. Somebody had to be creative about how they presented my situation in order for that to be appealing. And that looks different to different schools. Now that you're at the University of Miami, your intake level for that is at the highest level. But there's programs all down the spectrum that need players too. So there's always a fit. It just takes a level of this guy knows this guy at this place, or this particular program likes guys from Miami. So maybe they're going to take a look at guys from Miami. And when they call Miami, they'll call a guy like Ralph Suarez. Like, he always can provide players. So that to me is I can see why it would give goosebumps because it's like opportunity creation.
Absolutely.
Right? I'm really interested about baseball in Miami in the 90s, in that era, right? Like who were the dudes during your time? Like who were the names that really stand out? Like in my high school era, it was Gio Gonzalez, it was Adrian Cardenas, it was really that whole Pace team. But that was like my window. What was your window into? Who were those dudes?
Well, think about my window and just think about Westminster Christian at that time, right? I mean, Alex Rodriguez, J.D. Arteaga, Dan Perkins, Steve Butler, national champions, right? I think
they were the program.
Nationally winning national titles, right? But then you looked at Coral Gables High School and you had, Eli Marrero, you had Eddie Huff, you had Mikey Lowe, God, I'm forgetting the general manager of the Blue Jays,
Ross Atkins.
Ross Atkins, He
was a dude.
He was good enough to go play at Division I at Wake Forest, right? So it was, the talent was more concentrated because there was less schools. And this was during a time where there was this transition going on where, public schools only play public schools and private schools only play private schools. Obviously, Columbus was the exception because Columbus played, at one of the higher levels.
And that's not the case anymore now. Everybody plays everybody now.
Everyone plays everyone. And so I can remember it's 1992, 1993. Finally, a public school is going to play a small private school. And it was at Mark Light Stadium. It was Coral Gables High School, led by Eli Marrero, against Westminster Christian, led by Alex Rodriguez. Wow. And when I tell you this place was sold out like it was Florida State, Miami, that's no lie, no exaggeration. I mean, that was the game to go see, and it was packed, and there was excitement. Like, like it was the 7th game of a Major League World Series.
Right.
And so that to me was incredible looking back, right? And it stayed the same in your era as well, where high school sports was still the big thing, Now, obviously that's changed some, and it's unfortunate that our generation of kids, don't get to experience the rivalries that we had at the high school level for a couple of reasons, right? The more schools now, travel ball has become a big thing, and maybe there's more emphasis in that summer circuit, and kids look forward to that more than they would for their high school season. But I just think about high school baseball, 80s, which was ahead of my time, 90s, early 2000s. It was a fun time to see, high school sports, in Miami-Dade County.
Coach, let me ask you, now putting on your hat that you're wearing now, you played at that level, but now you're recruiting that level. My buddy Harold Martinez, former UM great, he's always complaining about this. He thinks there's too much emphasis on showcases, and we're missing guys that are actually productive for their high school team. You played, now you're in the seat where you're evaluating guys. Is there something to that? How do you look at the whole showcase versus high school?
I agree with him, right? And we can't just look at travel sports and showcases from a negative standpoint, right? The reality is it provides a platform for these kids to be seen and showcase to the different colleges and obviously to the pro team. So it's not all negative, right? However, because human nature is to go to these extremes and it's all or nothing, right? We live in this dichotomy where it's either or, right? And or, but if we looked at it from a complete, holistic standpoint, it does provide this amazing platform where players that maybe wouldn't be seen in the past are being showcased and seen now. But it does negatively impact development from a standpoint where kids are looking to only develop skills and not per se the learning how to play the game properly, right? Whatever that is, and that may mean something different to everyone. But one of the things that used to set South Florida players apart from the rest of the country wasn't necessarily the talent level, right? Because there's talent everywhere, right? But one of the things that was distinctive to the player that came out of South Florida was these instinctual players that just knew how to play the game. And they did the things that you couldn't teach. I think that's lost, and it's lost because we're so hyper-focused now on developing the skills and developing them in a manner where they lived in this silo on their own, which we all know the game, is multifaceted and there's so many different things that come into play, and that the skills alone by themselves are not going to result in success, right? So I think that's one of the biggest differences, right? And I, maybe I'm being a little harsh by saying that it's negative. I just think that if we integrated it in a more balanced manner, I think it's only but positives, right? Because again, it does provide this incredible platform for players to be seen that maybe they wouldn't be seen.
I'm so glad we arrived here because I think you're saying so many things that feel inherently true. And I'm calibrated on the other side of it, where I watched a lot of showcase ball covering Latin America. You watch a lot of purely showcase ball, and you see how those results, the skills you develop there are kind of incompatible with winning a baseball game sometimes. Right. They're too different. As a scout, you need to see the showcase ball. Right. So for the scouts, I can see why the scouts would welcome, and because it's more opportunities and looks against the best in the country, the best that's out there. So iron versus iron, you get to see it in a snapshot in one trip, 3 nights in a Marriott, and you got to look at the player. The high school season, you have to carry that out. So for a scout, that makes sense. You're Harold, who's a coach that's trying to win baseball games. I can 100% see how you that go to a showcase every other weekend or every month, you're playing with a completely new set of guys. You're not like, there's really no incentive to win that game.
Right.
The incentive is for you to showcase yourself, which is fine, which is good. That needs to happen for college, for pro. But I think it felt true about my upbringing in South Florida that it felt like I was playing for something all the time. Yeah. Like angle to win a game in every situation, to get an extra base in every situation. And that is what I think gets said to be lost in a showcase ball route, which that feels right, right? Like ask any travel ball coach that tries to get, it's like an all-star game. You get an all-star game, you get a collection of guys, and like, there's no chemistry there. There's no like, unless the guys have come up, which I watched, like the Florida Bombers were a thing when I was coming up. Like there were some South Florida travel ball teams that would go out, but it felt like the goal was like they're going to go win that event. It's not going to be like, okay, let me see how many first rounders can be showcased at this event. And it's a different logic, managing the game, managing the pitchers, managing the lineup. So I see those two things as incompatible, and I know that because of my experience doing Latin America. What we would receive on the player development intake is a lot of raw baseball ability without the refinement of the skill level of a very skilled game. Because at the very end, net result, Major League Baseball wins are a result of skilled, polished baseball. Yeah. So like to get there, there's the showcase ball doesn't really, I don't know, it's not conducive to that.
Yeah, and listen, I think that's a perfect example when we look at, the Latin American market, right? And something that you have vast experience in. But when you looked at it from a player development, I mean, these kids were just as talented as our domestic kids, right? Our domestic kids knew how to integrate those skills into a baseball game and utilize it so that, A, they could win games, but also allow them to become consistent ball players, right? So that performance output is consistent. Where the journey of the Latin American player, because it was that barnstorming showcase baseball, one of their biggest hurdles is how do I integrate these skills that I have effectively and consistently into my game? And you and I both know that there's many other things that they have to overcome, whether it's language, life skills in the United States, the culture. But that was one of the things, right? And so, again, it's not to knock showcase baseball. I do believe that if we took more of a balanced approach and valued both, I think you would see a more well-rounded, developed player.
Yes. How do we bring out the instinct to win is what I'll say. Because like as a scout, now I'm constantly evaluating the competitiveness level. And that comes down to, do you want to win that situation? And I think the showcase ball needs to find more ways, that era needs to find more ways to incentivize the angle to win the situation, whether it be win a pitch, win an inning, win a game, those kinds of things, because that is non-negotiable as you get into the big league level. And that's why I think you see like the guys that pass through LSU and University of Miami, and like there's like when you get past through that refinement program, like it's all about winning baseball games in those programs. A lot of Latin American kids don't get that. It's like you find that in pro ball, and pro ball development is interesting because it's not always winning a GCL game isn't like what you come out the end with. Even AA, AAA, it's not like it's nice to have winning teams, but it's not, the emphasis isn't placed there. Yet at the big leagues, it gets placed all the way there. So like, where do kids see that? And I think what you're saying, what I'm hearing is that I remember seeing it in high school, big time. And you're saying that, you did the same. And I guess that's a good segue into you would ultimately end up at the University of Miami, pitching for the University of Miami. How does that come together, and what was that experience like for you?
We were a successful program, battling for state titles, and I just so happened to be one of our better pitchers, and Laser Collazo saw me and offered me an opportunity to attend the University of Miami, and I couldn't say no. And again, because you are a young buck and you don't got the gray hairs that I have, think about growing up in Miami, 80s, early 90s. What was our big leagues? our big leagues was the University of Miami.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we didn't have the Marlins until I was a sophomore in high school.
Chicken tenders and milkshakes at the light.
Dream of coming here. This was my big leagues. And honestly, as I look back and retrospectively think, you know, I never reached my potential. I think in part because I made it to the University of Miami. It was like, hey, this is my big leagues. This is good. You know, and you know, again, maybe my perspective is not accurate as I look back, but I think of during my time as a professional baseball player, and the hunger wasn't the same. But when I was at the University of Miami, it was, this is my big leagues. And I got to do whatever it takes to make sure I contribute to our club so that we're in position to win a national title. And so you felt every single day that you walked into Mark Light Stadium, like you had to give it your best. Because you were playing for national titles, and you didn't want to be the guy that was going to keep your team and your teammates from winning a national title. So I know I went on a little further than what you asked, but I think it does go hand in hand. Of this was the big leagues, you know, 70s, 80s, early 90s before we got the Marlins.
Who were the dudes at the college level at that time? Do you remember like going through, like playing for those University of Miami programs? Who stands out from those times?
When I played there? Yeah. Pat Burrell, J.D. Arteaga, easily the best pitcher. And I'm not saying that because he's my boss now, but I mean, the numbers speak for themselves.
The spot on the Hall of Fame.
Played. Yeah, number retired. Pat Burrell was the number 1 overall pick. Jason Michaels played in the big leagues for the Phillies. Aubrey Huff, Bobby Hill.
So it was that era of Hurricanes baseball.
It was,
which is golden era. Yeah. If you go to a Hurricanes baseball game now and you look at those Hall of Fames, they're from a lot of those plaques are from those years.
Absolutely, Alex Santos. I mean, David Gill. It was an endless stream of talent, and a good portion originated from this area, from our home. You know.
What role would you gravitate toward in that pitching staff?
So as a freshman, I worked myself into being a late inning guy, and I was able to contribute on that club that was 1 out away from winning a national title. Then as a sophomore, I started as the number 3, and we opened the season at the University of Hawaii, and I get hit harder than I've ever get hit before in my life. And I tell you what, I think that's what led me to sports psychology was that one outing. Ended up being in the pen. And then as a junior, I started pen guy, wherever they needed me. And, again, I was blessed. I think by the time I left, after my junior year, I was 8th all-time in career appearances, which I'm sure that doesn't stand anymore, but it was an amazing journey. Yeah. If I have one regret in my life, Adrian and Danny, is, I was drafted out of high school, didn't sign. I was sophomore.
Who drafted you?
The Dodgers, Camilo Pascual.
Wow.
I was drafted as a sophomore at Miami because I was draft eligible by the Rays, Rudy Santine, which was also a legendary scout. Didn't sign. And then I was drafted again by the Tigers as a junior by Louis Ohawa, which works for the Cubs still. And honestly, my gut was telling me, man, I want to come back for my senior year. But these guys are going to think I don't want to play professional baseball. And we also lost 12 guys to the draft. I said, man, there's no way.
Right.
No chance we're going to win a national title the next year. So might as well sign.
Yeah.
Well, fast forward to the following spring, I'm somewhere in the Midwest League. And these guys are winning a national title. And I'm saying, my God, I should have just stayed another year, So
I was wondering where that was going. I didn't know it would end up there. That's incredible. So you go on to play professional baseball, to then end up working in professional baseball. So walk me through like getting from being a professional baseball player, recently drafted, to then ultimately ending up working in professional baseball?
Yeah, so I get released May 3rd of 2000. May 5th, I'm in Coach Morse's office. And I told him, Coach, this is what I want to do. I want to coach college baseball. You know, what I have to do. And obviously at that point in time, Coach Morris, legendary coach, another guy that always took care of his players, especially post-playing. He told me, well, Laz, I could help you get a volunteer job somewhere or a graduate assistant job. And, you know, this was after 4.5 years of minor league baseball. Yeah. And, you know, I was engaged to get married. I had just gone back to school that offseason to get my degree.
To finish up.
So I go, Coach, I can't do that. I need to work. He says, well, why don't you try the high school route? And so I became a 12th grade American government teacher. and I became the head coach at Coral Gables High School.
Wow.
And I did that for 3 years total. Ended up having 3 big leaguers on those teams: Yonder Alonso, Eddie Rodriguez, catcher, another University of Miami guy, and Jonathan Diaz, that went on to be a great shortstop at NC State. Fast forward 2013, plays a little bit on that club with the Red Sox that won a World Series. But I couldn't win a playoff game. I got to throw that out there. So maybe I wasn't a good coach. So I go on from there, and I end up at Barry University. And I'm still teaching government at Coral Gables High School.
Okay.
I would drive after school to Barry. I was the pitching coach and recruiting coordinator there for 2 years. As I'm starting my 3rd year, I'm driving on a Wednesday. I don't know why I remember all these dates, but I do. I'm driving from, teaching at Gables to Barry. I'm on I-95, and I get this call from this weird number. I didn't recognize the number or the area code, and it was John Lalone, which at that time was the scouting director for the Toronto Blue Jays. And he says, hey, we have an opening down there. I would love to interview you for a scouting job. I had never thought about professional baseball at that point.
College focused.
College focused. That was the only thing I wanted. I'm telling you, it didn't even cross my mind. So I go, wow, that's weird. And so I get to Barry, don't think anything of it. I put my stuff away in the locker. I go out to practice. I come back in. When I come back in, I have a missed call from Mike Rickard. Mike Rickard at that time was the East Coast scouting supervisor for the Boston Red Sox.
Shout out Mike Rickard.
He was a young assistant coach at Wake Forest when I was at the University of Miami. And he coached me in summer ball, the 2 years I played in summer ball. Wow. We became very close. Another guy that impacted my life, and incredible guy, and he's done incredible things in the game. So he calls me. I have a missed call from him. And I think, oh, that's how the Blue Jays got my number. And, I call him and I go, hey, Mike, thank you for the recommendation. He goes, what are you talking about? I go, no, the Blue Jays. He goes, man, I have no clue what you're talking about. We have an opening down in Florida. I would love to meet with you about this job.
An area scout opening.
Area scout opening. So
cover
it was basically
South Florida.
No, I covered half the state. So I had Orlando down through the Keys.
What they call I-4 down?
I-4 down.
Yeah.
And I go, this is crazy. Never did I think about professional baseball, yet here
Much less scouting.
I get 2 calls. And that was on a Wednesday. Thursday, I'm in the middle of teaching American government. And I get a call from Boston, and it was Jason McLeod, the scouting director. And here I am having this full-blown conversation in the middle of this class with all my students listening to it. That was Thursday. Friday, I fly out to Boston. And Tuesday, I was hired by the Red Sox. And so that started this incredible 14-year journey working for this incredible organization and incredible group of people.
I know we're going to get to the mental skills and all that.
Yeah.
And I want to get to this before we get there because I'm curious about that. I heard JD say something where he said during the recruiting process, evaluating, he's like, I'm trying to find pitchers that are going to be good from 18 to 22. I'm not worried about who's the best at 26. Now you have put on both hats, right? You're looking at who's going to be the best at 26, and now in your current job, you're looking at 18 to 22. So you're probably the most qualified person or one of the most qualified people to talk about this. Like, what's the difference between scouting somebody for college, which you played obviously at a high level, and then the professional ranks?
Yeah, I think if you're at the pro level, you could dream a little more and see that projection out a little longer, right? Where at the college level, yes, development is a big part, but you got to also be able to balance that out with performance. So you can't project a guy out too long, right? Or too far ahead. You have to be able to project, what is this kid going to look like 1, 2, 3 years from now? And so you have to be able to balance both. And, when we go out and recruit and you see these talented young men, is there an aspect of their game presently that will allow them to survive and perform right now? And what will they become their sophomore and junior years? And so you still do a little bit of both, right? But that looking ahead is a little tighter window.
So I loved that question because I think there really is, there's some overlap between those two. You need guys to be good at that early age range of 18 to 22. But there's also, like, putting on a professional scouting hat, your arc is so much longer as to when you're looking at a 5-6 year window, best case scenario out to first initiating his impact or his initiation into the big leagues, much less another 4 or 5 years after that into like pre-ARB, free agency years. So whereas for a college program, you need to lock in on this. Can I win with this guy and I'm willing to put up with some development because you have to, because on the recruiting side, players want to go to places they feel like they're going to end up being big leaguers at.
No doubt.
So it ends up being really important on that front too. And you need to allow players to develop sometimes. But in college, you're just crunched in with the need to win as well while you're getting that development. So the balance of how many freshmen can you carry versus how many are going to be playing and be able to impact the game as freshmen. To me, it feels even more difficult to factor in the winning in the immediate projection window. And that's what college coaches have to do. And I don't envy that job. It's tough.
Both, though,
for sure.
Right, Adrian? And you and I have had long conversations about this. They need that floor has to be high enough where they're going to be a productive member
Right.
of your club and they're going to help you win games. But that ceiling has to be high enough as well where this kid, through work, through a development plan, is going to be able to get better for you and be in position to be attractive enough for professional teams.
For sure. So I really want to lock in on the role of the area scout because I think this is one of the most slept on, underappreciated roles in all of baseball, maybe, like the job of the area scout. You just listed an area of Orlando down to Key West.
Yep.
You are the sole person responsible for all those players and for accountable to your scouting director and team to where, like, if some other team picks that guy or, like, you need to have known about him. You need to have seen him. You need to have put in a report. The last thing you could say is, I don't know, I didn't see him.
Right.
So, and that, Florida, we split in two. There are guys who cover the Pacific Northwest, or like
the Midwest,
the Four Corners. You cover these massive, less programs, but geographic distances.
Right.
And the South Florida gig in particular is tough because there's always a game for you to see. It's not seasonal as it is for some other guys where you can throttle up and down. You gotta, you spend all your life in that car, didn't you, during those years?
Yeah. Again, the Red Sox took care of us. We used to drive new Volvos every 2 years because you would put 100,000 miles on them.
There you go.
Absolutely. And I think going back to one of your questions, Danny, about the showcases, I think that's made life a little easier for scouts because you're able to go to these big showcases and see talented players playing against talented players. Versus maybe, I remember taking my assistant scouting director it was Manny Machado. We take him down, and Brito's playing Miami Beach, and they're, you know, my assistant scouting director has to see Manny Machado hitting a 75-mile-per-hour fastball, you know, and you're trying to make a decision whether or not you're going to take this guy in the first round, where, again, I think this is the positive side of these showcases, right? But to your question, to your point, Adrian, I mean, you have to be on top of your area. You got to be really connected into the community because you're not everywhere, right? And so you want this network of high school coaches, of travel ball coaches, of college coaches, of educators in the schools, you know, because, you know, it's one thing just to be able to identify and evaluate that talent, but then you got the makeup part of it, right? And understanding what makes this kid tick. Is he a good or bad kid? What type of environment has he come in? You know, how has he dealt with adversity? What type of human being is he away from the field, right? And those are things that are critical when you're putting this draft board and organizing this draft board. But similar to us here as well, right? At the University of Miami and to college coaches, you know, not only do you have to have this great network of again, coaches and people in the community that give you leads on players, right? But as well, you want the right guys. And, you know, if there's something that I look back on from last year's club, you know, the one thing that we definitely hit on was we had the right guys. And some of it is luck, but some of it is doing your homework and trying to get information and trying to figure out what type of kid are we bringing into our program.
We talk about makeup here all the time as the most opaque kind of part of what you do here, and it's kind of, you're talking about what happens at the very step one, the professional, the area scout that needs to get to know the player, the family, the kid, to be able to answer the question of like, hey, what are we bringing into our organization? And especially when that narrows and focuses into a first-round pick, potentially. What year were you picking the year of Manny Machado? Do you remember?
I want to say 2009, but I could be off.
No, but what
years.
Pick did you have in that?
No, we were late. So
okay, so you had no chance at Manny Machado.
And you know, I remember the battle was him or Castellanos. But
did you have him over Castellanos?
I had Manny over Castellanos.
Okay.
But I will tell you, it was a battle within our organization. I wouldn't say that some of my superiors had it like that. I would say that there were some that had Castellanos over Manny.
Interesting. So the one I want to get to, right, is like, I know you have some familiarity with the Anthony Rizzo process, correct? Yeah. Right? Like you would have been the area scout when the Red Sox selected Anthony Rizzo out of Stoneman in high school, right? So like the Boston Red Sox, first, they represent it's Red Sox nation nationally. They have this obviously a huge following, but they also represent a portion of the country in the Northeast. So like, for people to understand what the first round pick for the Boston Red Sox is, what it is to that organization, and that's not only high money, high pressure, high dollar, but the processes of the entire organization lock into whatever you were just doing as an area scout. If he was in consideration for that pick, you have to go and make a case for that player, especially out of high school, I would imagine.
Absolutely.
And so I'm wondering if you could walk us through, I think the time has expired long enough that this could be talked about, but that Anthony Rizzo process, because that's a player getting to not only big league impact, but big league impact at the highest of levels, World Series champion, cornerstone player, all from the result of an area scout's coverage of a player to then provide the snapshot at draft time for your team to be like, okay, we're going to back what you're saying here. And you're not the only one who sees them, but I wonder how much you remember from that process.
And take it a step further. What an amazing representative of an organization, right? What he's done for children's cancer and just... I need to say it was beginner's luck. It was the first guy I drafted. So that draft was good to me. I drafted him and Yasmani Grandal, and Yasmani ended up coming to the University of Miami, which was the right decision for him. But Anthony was a high school first baseman, and as you know, right, like high school pitching is a humongous risk. high school first basemen, that's a very long road to the big leagues, right? Because you not only do you got to hit, you got to be an impact hitter. And so I remember seeing him and, okay, this kid is big, strong, has some pop. I like him, you know, but I remember I wasn't in love with him, right? And this was in the fall. But there was a follow. I put in a follow on him, which essentially means, hey, this is a guy that in the spring we'll go back and see.
The follow initiates the process, basically. The first normal thing you submit.
Right. So you may have 60 follows, and out of those 60, maybe only 30 actually make your draft list, right? So I go do an in-home visit with Anthony. And again, I'm thinking big physical first baseman, trying to figure out the athleticism. But I go do this home visit, and the one thing that stood out right off the bat was this guy gets it. Like, this guy gets it.
What does that mean to you?
Like, he understands what it means to compete. He understands that there's a process in place. He played football. He was a tight end on his football team. So now the athleticism question mark that I had goes out the window. Check. He's able to engage you in conversation. There's a why behind the answers he gives you. There's amazing parents there with him. And they asked me this question at the end of this one-on-one meeting. They go, Laz, should we have an advisor, an agent? And again, maybe because I was naive, because this is my first year scouting, and I think I would always do it this way because I want to be as transparent, as honest as I can, just like I would want someone to be like that with my children. I said, absolutely. If there's someone that has a track record, that has a history, that has been doing this for a living, absolutely. And I know that part of the story doesn't mean anything yet, but you'll see when this comes full circle. So I go out the first game of the spring. When I saw Anthony in the fall, it was this Deadpool guy that was a big boy that could get into his power and hit the ball a long way. All of a sudden, I go in the spring, and it's this guy that had cut down on his swing, and he's just focused on attacking the middle of the field with this line drive focus and backspinning the ball and hitting doubles off the wall. And you knew once this guy gets into his man strength, those doubles are going to start becoming home runs. So all of a sudden, this approach had become mature and advanced. And that's when Laz Gutierrez fell in love with Anthony Rizzo. And so, and as you know, when you really like someone and you shoot them up the board, that's when the traffic starts coming in. And the traffic being your regional cross-checker, your national cross-checker.
The layers to the process.
The layers to the process. Your scouting director, assistant scouting director, special assistants to the GM.
Right.
I mean, I made sure that the report I had put in created enough waves where everyone in the Red Sox organization that dealt with the amateur draft was coming in to see this guy.
And you need to host all of these people when they come watch them. So you have to tee up their experience.
Tee up the experience.
So like I've always found that fascinating. You have to go into like a travel agent mode.
Travel agent, you set up.
Are they taking BP that day? Am I going to get to see an infield, outfield? Am I going to see 3 at-bats?
Where are we having dinner? Laz, are you going to cook me that churrasco steak that you did the last time? And so I have everyone come in to see him.
Yeah, a big report is going to make.
You know, and
this is Theo Epstein era.
This is Theo
Red Sox,
Epstein
right?
era.
So swing decision. I ask it because it makes sense that they would chase this profile. Anthony Rizzo starts to make really good swing decisions, which is a thing we talk about ad nauseum here. Right. But like he would end up being a super high on base. Like he was kind of right in the pocket of philosophy of Red Sox offense at that point in time.
No
am I right about that?
Absolutely correct. Yeah. Absolutely correct. So the draft comes around. We're considering taking him in the 3rd round. I call him, and as you know, as someone that's been in that room, you call about 5 guys that you're considering taking.
Yep.
You know, so it kind of puts the amateur scout in a tough position because you're not the one that's taking the player.
Right.
But you're the one that's calling them and saying, hey, we're thinking about taking you.
Right.
What are the dollar figures? What are you thinking?
And talking to the agent the whole time through,
And talking
right?
to the agent, and Mark Pollock was his agent, which is an amazing guy and an incredible professional. But my relationship with Anthony was so in depth that I could just call Anthony directly. And so
Where were you picking that year?
towards the end, maybe mid-20s.
Okay, so 20 picks will be
Yeah.
and you don't know how the board's going to fall in front of
Right,
you.
exactly. All I could tell you is that the Tigers were picking ahead of us. And again, that story I told you in the beginning, we'll circle back around to it. And so I tell Anthony, they're considering taking you. What's the signability? So I tell our assistant GM, which was Ben Charrington, which is currently the general manager of the Pirates.
Shout out Ben Charrington.
And yeah, Ben is a great guy. And we don't take him. We take someone else. And so the draft that day, during that time, would go the first 6 rounds ends, and you would go back the next day. And so
Where was he committed?
FAU.
FAU. Okay.
FAU.
So you're working against an FAU commitment, right?
Right. And so I call him, and I go, Anthony, I know you're probably disappointed. We are thinking about taking you in the 8th round, and we're going to give you above slot money. So that means that we're going to overpay for what that spot in the draft pays for. We're going to overpay him. And he goes, Laz, I appreciate it. I just want to tell you something. The Tigers have offered me the same amount of money, but they're going to take me in the 7th round. The Tigers pick one pick ahead of us.
Wow.
I'm sorry, flip. We pick one pick ahead of them.
Uh-huh.
And so
if you pass, they're going to get him.
If we pass, they're going to take them. And their scouting director at that time, that I forget his name, was the former scouting director for the Red Sox. So Jason McLeod, which was our scouting director, calls him and says, hey, I just want to make sure this agent is not playing us against each other. We're thinking about taking Anthony, in the 7th round tomorrow. He goes, yeah, if you don't take him, we're definitely taking him. So we end up taking Anthony before the Tigers did.
In which round are we in?
It's 7th round.
7th round.
7th round. And so in my mind, the whole time I'm thinking, Anthony told me this because maybe he liked the Red Sox more than he liked the Tigers.
Right.
Is the only thing I could come up with, right? Even though, the parents are originally from New York, big Yankee fans,
Right.
So once we agreed to terms, I go to his house. They're having this big party at his house.
Yeah.
And I swing by, and I tell him, hey, dude, let me ask you a question. Why would you tell me that? He goes, Laz, because you were the only scout that told us that we should have an agent.
Wow.
And again, I'm not better than anyone else,
right?
And again, maybe I was naive, to the nature of the business, but I wanted to be honest with the family, and the only reason he told us that was because of that sidebar question at the very end of this 2-hour meeting at the house.
Right. That's so interesting because I think the logic there of why a team might not suggest, hey, yeah, you should definitely get an agent is because like you're trying to get things at the most economic deal for your team possible, right? Because you have to allocate it elsewhere. And agents are on the other side of that in terms of, but this process is so complex, especially at the first round, weighing against a college commitment, all that like I think agents, they play such a big role and a deserved one, right? Like they play an important, crucial role in the guidance of what happens to these young men. So like you answering that question was like just saying like, hey, yeah, I think, if it's the right guy and you trust him.
Now, and I did it because I wanted to be transparent and honest, right?
Sure.
But as I look at it, these are trained individuals. This is their business. They understand the business.
Deeply.
Right? So Yeah, are they trying to do what's best for their client? Absolutely. But they also understand what are realistic expectations, right? Where a parent that is not part of the business, that may not be educated, right? May do more harm than good for their kid, not because they're necessarily trying to do something
while trying to do the best.
Right, they're trying to do the best. Right. But in turn, it ends up being... So I rather deal with advisors and agents any time of the day. Yeah. Because and especially the ones that have the best interests in their client, their players, and guys that have a track record, right? That have gone through it. And again, fortunate enough where there's a lot of good ones that we get to work with, both at the professional level and even at the college level now.
Coach, you've been very generous with your time. I want to make sure we get to your performance psychology background before you get out of here, because it's fascinating. You got a doctorate from Grand Canyon. Mixing that with the scouting part. You know, we always talk about makeup like good kid, cares, right? I'm saying it's easy, but that's more discreet. I always think of an anecdote from Billy Beane where he said that he was like a guy that studied the opposing pitcher, agonized over every one of his at-bats, and his roommate was Lenny Dykstra, and he didn't care about anything. He was just like, I'm going to hit the next pitch. I don't care who the pitcher is. I'm going to hit it, and he was able to sort of bounce back. You now, either as a scout or a coach trying to work on performance, just how do you zero in on that ability to just forget about it and be confident the next at-bat or pitch?
Yeah, I think we got to look at mental skills just like we would look at any physical attribute, right? And so what do we do to get stronger? We get in the weight room and we train our bodies every day. What do we do to become a better hitter? We get in the cage and we work on our swing and our hitting. What do we do as pitchers? We jump on the mound and work on our pitching, right? So why not treat the mind the same way and be able to integrate mental skills training as a proactive fundamental, just like the other fundamentals, right? Versus, reactive where, holy crap, I'm struggling. I need to talk to someone, a coach or a mental skills coach about, how I'm handling this mentally, right? Why wait until that point, right? And the truth of the matter is that there's only been 23,000 plus guys that have played at the major league level in over 185 years of Major League Baseball. There's a lot of more talent than just 23,000 players, right? So what is the separator? And to me, the separator is the mind. And that's the only reason why I wanted to get further educated and try to have an understanding for it so that I could understand what makes people elite and be able to teach it. And again, I think we've reached a point, or at least I'm hopeful, that as an industry, and when I say industry, a sports industry, not just baseball, where we don't have to treat this as voodoo science, right? We don't have to treat it as something, you don't touch that. We got to train our minds the same way we do our bodies. So that the example that you just gave me, right? How about if Billy Beane had someone that had taught him how to understand that self-talk, that internal dialogue that's going on when he's struggling, and create a level of self-awareness where he's able to redirect that internal dialogue and turn it into something that allows him to focus not only on something that's positive, but something that brings him into his next at-bat, his next game, versus, hey, I'm still thinking about that game that happened 5 days ago.
The ability to turn the page.
Ability to turn the page by, I tell our guys, your ability to train your focus is not just focus, but more importantly, refocus, right? Being able to turn the page, go on to the next pitch. And I think the best of the best are the ones that are able to do that more consistently.
I agree with that so much. And like what I'm getting to will point at some of the best and the best. But I'm glad you brought us here, Danny, because my window into meeting you, Laz Gutierrez, is I am a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed intern. I was actually working for an agency before this point. This is 2013. And I'm lucky enough, because of Ben Charrington, to get an internship in player development with the Boston Red Sox, which we've talked about on the show. My report was to Fort Myers, Florida, to go to the Red Sox complex for extended spring training in April 2013. And when I get there, me and Caleb Fuddy, shout out Caleb Fuddy whenever he watches this, but we were the two interns at the development complex, which is basically, I've talked about it before, going to pick up guys from the airport, do everything. And Laz was one of the coordinators. I believe you were the coordinator, the mental skills coordinator.
I think at that time I was still the player development program coordinator.
Player development program coordinator.
I had to dabble in the sports psychology area,
but you would effectively be the de facto performance coach.
Correct.
Especially for the young Latin kids getting to the United States for the first time.
Yep.
So you would go, like the Dominican Summer League would graduate players into the GCL at the time. And that was my window into professional baseball with the Boston Red Sox. And in that room was George Lombard, who's the current bench coach for the Tigers, Darren Fenster, who's a big-time coordinator with the Diamondbacks right now. Andy Fox was in that room. Howie was in that room. And that was my first window into professional baseball. And I'll never forget you in particular because you helped steer me in my first journey in professional baseball. When you're an intern, you're just trying to make a good impression, right? So you're trying to work hard, do all the things that you need to do, but also the people who kind of tell you when it's like, hey, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. So you impacted me a lot and continue to do so over the course of my career. But I also watched you impact what I, as a scouting director, would grow to appreciate, which is Latin players arriving to the United States for the first time and just going like, oh shit, like professional baseball in the United States. And so you being on the performance or psychology side of that, like your intake of all these like super complicated, nuanced things, man, like things people I think blow past when a Latin kid gets to the United States, doesn't speak any English. And that's what I'll get to. Your being bilingual as a result of having Cuban parents growing up in Miami allowed you to be the bridge in those situations, which can often be the only person that these guys are talking to. Yeah. And to your point, like, yeah, I remember the Manny Margot's, the Rafi Devers, the Mauricio Dubons, like those guys stand out, but like there's so many other guys that kind of don't make it to that level. And it's a lot because of what you're talking about, what you just asked about, the performance side of things. It's the first time they got to learn to win situations and to win games. And the Red Sox, I think, do a great job with this. And you were kind of that felt like more of a pioneer program at the time, that mental skills, not that it didn't exist before, but the Red Sox had really, okay, we're going to allocate resources to this. And you were one of those coordinators. So what do you remember from those initial roles, like the mental skills stuff? Because it was so impactful, and I needed to give you your flowers for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good memories.
Yeah.
I think about some of the things that we had to get through when you were our intern there, and you and I had to put out some fires down in the GCL.
Oh yeah.
Listen, you've hit on the point. The domestic players had an advantage, right? They're playing maybe in a different part of the country, but
not at all easy, but an advantage.
Right. They're playing in their country. Never easy, but they're an advantage, right? They're playing in their country. They understand the culture. Something as simple as going to the airport and understanding what the signs are telling me. How do I get a ticket to get on a plane as I get promoted to the next level? Like, those are things that we could have taken for granted with our, foreign players, right? So taking them to the airport on a field trip, teaching them this is how you go and get your boarding pass. This is how you get through security. These are the things you can't take. These are the things you can take. Sitting at a table, how do you order food? What is tip a customary thing in the United States? If so, how much? If I'm sick, how do I go to be seen? How do I go to the hospital to be seen by a doctor? I mean, some of the things that we take for granted, and I think, I think Major League Baseball has made incredible strides in this area in preparing their Latin American players. But I think at the very beginning it was, hey, let's just get an English program down in the Dominican and teach them English. And the truth of the matter is the cultural differences are seismic in size, right? So massive. So
and between Venezuela and Dominican, and you layer it and it goes deeper, yeah.
You know, so it was awesome to see how we progress as an industry.
Yeah.
I do believe that the Red Sox and a handful of other organizations were ahead of the curve in this. I mean, even from a performance psychology standpoint, you know, we had this curriculum, we established this curriculum, but that curriculum had to be different for our Latino players, right? Not only from a language standpoint, but from how do you deliver it and facilitate it to them in a manner where it makes sense to them, you know, beyond just the language, right? Understanding that there are cultural differences, understanding that there are educational differences, and that what you may say something to a domestic player may sound completely different to a Latino player. So something, for example, which today as we were throwing bullpens, you know, we have this great Latino player from New York, Dominican background, awesome, and you know, we're going from a 4-seam to a 2-seam, and I'm telling him, hey, don't go for the max. Just feel it out in front. And so he literally just is feeling it. And where I'm trying to prevent him from trying to throw it 100, but now he's going at 80, feeling it. Because as we do as Latinos, we take everything literally.
Right.
And so I had okay, let me take a step back and rephrase this. You know, so think about that times 50 in professional baseball, where, again, the delivery of this message has to be in tune based on this kid's background and where he's coming from.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think people blow past sarcasm, right? Like, people don't understand sarcasm doesn't cut culturally the way you think it does. American sarcasm is just part of American culture, American comedy. But in Latin America, it's not as clear. And sarcasm is literally saying something literally, taken literally. And sometimes a coach is saying something that they think is a joke, and it's landing like an insult. And it like the humor doesn't get caught in between. So just as an example, and I want to be mindful of your time here, but I want to fast forward us through into 2018, where you'd do the graduation through the system, and you would be the major league mental skills coach at the major league level for the Boston Red Sox, the year that they had one of their best seasons ever in 2018. Like, what can you tell us high level from what it's like to observe winning at the highest level from the role that you were in?
Yeah. Man, so many things. First of all, from a personal standpoint, seeing our babies, you know, seeing Mookie Betts.
Right. You watched that arc.
Bogarts, Jackie Bradley Jr., Christian Vasquez. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Yeah.
At any given point during that season, 7 out of the 9 starters were homegrown guys.
Yep.
And I hope that doesn't get lost, because the Red Sox during that time, their ability to identify and acquire talent and then develop that talent was at a different level.
Yeah.
And that may get lost because big market team that could pay guys. I mean, we paid guys to be the guys that would come in and fill the holes, but the majority of those players that were on those championship teams were homegrown guys.
And picked in parts of the draft that are not, they're the obvious guys.
Exactly.
Mookie Betts is a 5th-round pick. Jackie Bradley Jr. is a 1st-round pick, but back of the 1st round. So, like, you're picking consistently in this part of the draft that's hard to really, be at the top of it.
Correct. And so that brought me full circle. Like, God, these were our babies. Now they're leading us to a world title.
Yeah.
That's one thing that stands out. The other thing that stood out was just watching Alex Cora. I mean, his ability to manage at that level, not only from a strategic standpoint, was so impressive. From a tactical standpoint, was impressive. The way that he managed that entire playoff run was light year ahead of any competition that we faced. And then personality and roster management. He could just get the best of those players. And his ability and willingness, whatever the right word was, to make every guy feel special and make them feel like they played a humongous role, whether it was a star or not a star, was incredible and impressive. And then from a performance psychology standpoint, I mean, there was 3 things that really stood out. Number one, these players wanted to win at all costs. And whatever they did. And I think that's something that separates a big leaguer from the rest of the population, right? Like, these guys would have ping pong tournaments and you would think it was the 7th game of the World Series. They would have fantasy league and they would fly in their GMs for their fantasy league team, right? The second thing, their ability to handle anxiety, right? And that the fear, right? That these guys fear the same way we all fear. They bleed the same way we bleed, but they're able to handle it and allow that fear and that anxiety to work for them rather to be something that holds them back, right? And I think the last thing that stood out was their ability to focus on the right thing at the right time. They weren't focused on the pitch that just happened. They were focused on the pitch now. They weren't focused about the game that's tomorrow. They're focused on the now. They weren't focused on the umpire screwing. They weren't focused on Alex maybe not putting them in the starting rotation. They were focused on the now. And that in itself is a skill that needs to be sharpened and developed. And so those 3 characteristics really stood out with that club, but really stands out with that major league population. And I'm sure if we went in the NFL, those would be characteristics that stood out as well, right? Like, elite guys handle field better than anyone else. They focus on the right thing at the right time, and they're ultra competitive.
Yeah, that's well, I want to just thank you formally for the role you played, because that World Series ring from 2018 is probably the peak or the height of, like, when I think about my baseball career overall, it's that window into that year of so many things aligning, so many processes aligning, that, like, the first one in 2013, I was just an intern, so I didn't get to really, but, by 2018, I was in a more significant role. And so when that happens, it's just magic, man. And and for you to be in the role that you were in, to incubate and promote, like, performance, to then go on and win the World Series, that means your role was, like, I view your role as quite an impactful one across, like, a wide scope of players. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you, because that was a special year for all the reasons you just listed, and because it's the thing everybody in professional baseball is trying to do, desperately trying to win a World Series. So to have gotten to that point, especially with that group, is incredible. And
and as you know, it's not linear, right? Like, none of this is linear. Like, so many things have to come together, and again, we live in this era where we're trying to measure things. And listen, we've made incredible strides, and and even at our level, we have 2 full-time data analysts, we have a biomechanist, and the work they do is essential and critical. But there's also a small aspect of performance that's not black and white, right? And so that's where I think performance psychology comes into play, leadership development, culture development. Again, I'm lucky that I work for someone that values a holistic approach to development, and we try to hit every aspect of it. So it's been amazing to be able to go from a progressive organization like the Red Sox that had all the resources in the world to be able to implement these different facets to a place like the University of Miami, where we're able to emulate that same type of approach. And that, to me, has been incredibly fun.
I wanna be able to kind of put an exclamation point as the most recent thing, which is your role as the pitching coach for the University of Miami right now. So Danny, I kind of I know you'd probably have a focused question that I feel like we can.
Oh, I got 70, but I know Coach got to get out of here.
You got me, Danny. You got me here.
Here's what I wanted to ask, really, because last year's team, I remember talking to you just kind of in the scrums about the team, and you mentioned the character. JD mentioned the character. our guy, the Orchid Man, I was talking to him kind of off the record, and he was saying the character's different. I interviewed all those kids, so I know the character was different from that standpoint. But then it's one thing to talk about it like before the season, then the low points that you guys hit, not just one, but really two, like, I don't want to say rock bottom, but it's hard to get worse on a team that did what you guys did.
Right.
And then to be able to push through, you also had the 2 freshman starters, which of course that falls on 2 of your job titles, right? As pitching coordinator and pitching coach and mental skills. What did you learn that season or get affirmed that season watching that team? Forget the baseball part of it, but the psychological, cultural part of it.
That culture still matters, and that developing the mental part of it, getting the right guys is critical. You know, and we were lucky in part because we got the right guys. Like special group, one of the most special groups I've ever been around, like bar none. As a player, as a coach, as a scout, major league, college, whatever, this was an incredible club. Part of it was we lucky that we got the right guys, but part of it was we emphasized it. And that was one of the things that really stood out from 2024 moving on to last season was we had to emphasize this and not take it for granted. Because I think it's very easy to take it for granted, especially if you're a successful organization, successful program, and you think, hey, this is passed on to the next group. Again, it's easy to take it for granted. We didn't take it for granted. And we dedicated every week a specific day. It was Culture Wednesday, where this is all we did. It was develop the mental skills, develop our leaders, develop the values that are at the core of our foundation as a group, and really emphasize that. I mean, we took the kids to the beach. We talked about being selflessness. Okay, how do we live that out as teammates? We talked about being resilient. How do we live that out as individuals and as a group? And the kids had to do presentations, I mean, and really put effort and thought into it. And so, again, a combination of both. And again, being lucky, bringing in the right guys. But also, I say luck, but also we emphasize focusing on making sure that we brought the right makeup guys in. And we did that. But then we also worked on that and developed it just like we did the physical side of it, right? And like I could remember some of these lows that we had early on in the season, and I'm sitting down with JD and we're thinking, these kids aren't panicking. Do they care? And, you know, that was a thought that crossed our mind. Do they care? And it was, no, not only do we care, we got each other's back, but we're not going to panic. And it's all going to come together. And it came together. And that month of April was incredible, right? Or a month and a half. And then at the end of the season, just when you think you got it rolling, and then all of a sudden we get slapped in the face again. And yet, Coach, we got it. And, you know, we go to Hattiesburg, and it's a tough draw, and because we did it to ourselves. And yet, you know, all that resiliency, all that work, you know, the makeup of our players was incredible, and it all came out. And you know, again, it was a special time.
Griffin Hugus would get selected in the 3rd round of the Major League Draft this year, as coming off of a year where he was a two-way player the year before. So from a scouting perspective, relatively, I don't want to say unknown, but just an under-scouted asset, to then get selected, not only get selected, but in the 3rd round by the Seattle Mariners, who I think are doing some pretty interesting things pitching-wise. And I bring up Griffin because he seems like not a modern-day pitcher, not that there haven't been pitchers like him, but you got to watch that incoming as a transfer, spends time in the University of Miami program, nets out, you know, a 3rd round pick, like off two-way guy, gets there, becomes your Friday night guy, and then would go on to be selected pretty high, as well as other guys, Brian Walters, like guys who would also do well. But what was it about Griffin that kind of allowed him to take that leap over the course of like 1 year, basically?
Yeah. Ultra athletic, ultra competitor, growth mindset. You know, so we're, again, lucky enough that we're at this amazing place where we have a good number of resources that have been put in place to ensure that our processes from a development standpoint and are in place, and they're actionable, right? And so, one of the first things that we realized with Hugus, we have our pitching lab both on the game mound and indoor. And one of the things that we realized right off the bat that this kid's fastball plays up differently.
Right? Why is that?
Well, because I think you have such a high athletic kid that moves down the slope very violently. And that's where, again, the resources come into play, right? Where we have this $2 million biomechanical system known as Kenetrax, right? That collects 600 data points. And we have this biomechanist, right? And we're able to say, man, a lot of force down the slope, highly athletic. We're losing some energy that makes them inconsistent out in front. How do we make these small tweaks so that, he sticks that delivery line as long as he can, And so, again, we look at development, and I think social media plays a huge role in this, where we think it has to be these humongous changes. And they have to be these cookie cut changes. No. You got to be able to identify what is it that your player does well. Again, Griffin, highly athletic, fresh arm, quick arm. Then you get into the part that you can measure, which is high-level competitor that cares about his teammates as much as he cares about himself. And then what is the development plan that's put in place based on his unique needs and attributes? And again, it all lined up with him. But part of that has to be that the player is willing to be open-minded, right? And as you and I know, development is not linear, right? And there's many different roads that you have to take to get to that final point. And Griff was all about that. It's funny because this last week, the group had to do this presentation on selflessness. Actually, it wasn't a presentation. This year, I'm having them do a film. So they make a film, and they act out what selflessness looks like. And one of the things they put on there was Griffin in Game 2 of the Super Regional gets knocked out of the game early, yet when we're making a run to come back and win that game, he is the first one out of the dugout, hugging his teammates, cheering his teammates. Mind you, Game 3, as we're in position to possibly win this game, and B-Walt not available to close it out, we're throwing around, hey, should we get Griff to close this? And I was going to turn around to go ask him if he's able to do it. He's right in back of me. He goes, Coach, give me the ball. You can't teach that. You can't teach that. And so, again, there's not one thing that makes these guys elite or that made Griffin elite and the successful player that he was. It's this combination of so many different things that came into play.
Yeah. That's a situation that needs to be celebrated, and I think he's going to do very well as a professional because he has that. I think you're right. I think he has that different fastball, and that's what I meant about a modern day pitcher. That like even that 92, 94, like it's different. It plays different. It plays up. It has like a quality, and I think a premier pitching organization in the Mariners is grabbing that and identifying that. So I was going to land this with asking why. Like what makes the University of Miami a compelling place, but you just explained a version of that. I'm wondering if you would close this out that way, right? Like what makes the University of Miami a compelling like destination right now?
There's a couple of things that come to mind, right? And I know that roster changes are coming to effect, but that's not truly going to happen until the next 4 years, right? First of all, we've always had the smallest roster in the ACC and the SEC. We've always been at 35, right? So I think the roster limits are going to be at 34, right? So we have to develop talent. We have to acquire talent, but we have to develop that talent. So if you look at our processes, if you look at our personnel, everything's been put in place so that we create this environment of development. And so what do I mean by that? Again, the technology, all the bells and whistles. We have it all, and it really emulates what you see at the professional level, whether it's motion capturing system. in the cages, whether in our indoor lab, whether it's our force plate mound in the indoor lab, whether it's our Kenetrack system on the mound. But I think the secret sauce is the personnel, right? We've gone from a 5-man coaching staff to having 13 people on staff. We have a biomechanist that allows us to leverage this technology. I'm just a dumb pitching coach. We got to hire the experts. Again, what you see in professional baseball. We have 2 full-time analysts. Our trainer is a physical therapist that runs our fellowship at our university. So at all times, we have 2 PTs on site, and we have the University of Miami Sports Medicine Institute right in back of right field. So our strength coach just works with baseball. And he's a well-known guy in our community.
Yes,
I mean, you have more big leaguers there in the fall than you have college players, right? We have a nutritionist. So when you say, hey, we're about development, well, let's put our money where our mouth is. And again, when you look at our environment, smallest roster. So it's not an assembly line where we just move on to the next.
Right.
Part of development is going through failure. We have to live that because we don't have an endless amount of players. And then where are our resources put in place? We have 13 people on staff whose sole responsibility is to see the development of this player from a 360 perspective, truly from a holistic standpoint. So that in itself should be a great selling point. Family-oriented program, right? Everything's about family here. It's less of a business. It's more of a family, right? Amazing university, only 18 kids per class. You're not going to fall through the cracks. You're in this incredible international city where it's become the place in our country. Obviously, I'm biased.
We agree.
Yeah, the angle to that is we're not this program that's part of this international city and we're lost because we have all the professional teams. We still continue to be at the forefront of our community, right? People talk about us all the time. Not always positively, right? But that's part of it. I'd rather that than no one talk about us, right? So when people talk about some of these other schools that may be in these smaller towns where they're the only show in town, we're a big show in a big town.
Yeah, and I think that's a good place to put the exclamation point on it, because I think you guys just had a run that I think is making the program, like, people feels like a lot of positive is being said, and rightfully so. And a lot of time good processes, but now bookending that with good results as well, and good and winning baseball games, which Miami has a reputation for liking winning programs. So it feels very much like that's going in that direction after what I thought was a special year last year. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I love having conversations like this. To not have 2-hour conversations is the only reason I'm cutting this short. So I'm going to say that I would like to have a version 2 of this where we can get into more of a pitching weeds, because I know those are the conversations that I really like to sink my teeth into with yourself, which is between the lines, pitching, mentality, focus, approach, things like that. And we can go on that for a few hours. So I'm going to hold you to coming back here. But this was one of my favorite conversations, and I'm not surprised by that. Danny, anything before we go?
No, man, I'm ready to sign with the University of Miami.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks, guys. Please remember to like and subscribe. It really helps the show, and it really allows us to keep reaching more people so that we can have more conversations like this. So more to come.